name is Gabby and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here then welcome to my channel, and today's video is going to be my November 2024 reading wrap-up. November was a month, not a very good one, but a month nonetheless, and in that month I read 1 book, 3 audiobooks, 6 manga volumes, and then the usual manga chapters. I will have the content warnings for everything that I can find linked down below in the description along with links to some resources, and let's go ahead and get into it. And we are going to start by talking about the first 3 chapters of Sakamoto Days by Yuto Suzuki. And Sakamoto Days follows a legendary hitman who was once considered the greatest of all time until he got married, had a baby, and basically retired from that life to live a quiet life as the owner of a neighborhood store, and time has passed peacefully since then. Until his past catches up to him and someone gives him an offer that he can't refuse that pulls him back into the assassin world. This has an anime adaptation coming out soon over on Netflix, and it's one that has generated like a good amount of hype already, and it's not even out yet. And it's also just one of those series that I've always just kind of assumed that I would love once I eventually got to it, whether that was the manga or the anime, and honestly I'm not so sure. Like, a lot of the comedy is fun. I could see myself grow to really like a lot of these characters. Like, the beginnings of what I thought would always be my relationship with this series are there, but I also just don't know why I didn't see the fat phobia coming. And those are the type of jokes that just didn't work for me. They just kind of made me tired and disappointed, which is why I only got through 3 chapters of this, and I do think that I still will try to watch the anime to see if it gets any better. It also would not be the first time that I misjudge a series this early on, but for now, I also just don't really feel the need to read any more of it. And next up, we have our first audiobook, which is The Message by Ta-Nehisi. This is a combination of 3 essays by this author. The first revolves around his trip to Senegal and his personal feelings during this trip. The second surrounds a trip to South Carolina, where a teacher who wanted to teach one of his books is having her job threatened for that. And the final one covers his trip to Palestine, where he realizes the gap between the narratives that are being pushed and accepted and reality. This was my first book from this author, and to my understanding, this is an author who has a lot of really amazing books and just a lot of really interesting and amazing things to say. And based on The Message, I do see where that comes from, and he does read the audiobook to you, which I do think adds to what I'm about to say. But he's just a really interesting writer and speaker, and I thought that it was really interesting and also educational to hear his first-hand experiences in all 3 of these essays. And then I also thought it was interesting to hear how he went from being ignorant to knowledgeable about what's going on and what has been going on in Palestine. And through his essay, he was able to pull like the usual heartbreak and the anger that I feel for the people of Palestine out of me in a way that was really strong. And that was the case for the other 2 essays as well. Like, this fully had me hooked into it from beginning to end. Next up is the audiobook for When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain by Nghi. This is the second book in the Singing Hills cycle, and it follows a cleric who finds themselves and their companions at the mercy of a band of tigers who wish to eat them. In order to stay alive, the cleric must tell the story of a tiger and her scholar lover while they await the help of the mammoths. And they discover that the truth of a story is not always what becomes history. I listened to the first audiobook from this series last month, and while it did things that I really liked, I just didn't get into it as much as I wanted to. And When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain still had that amazing fantasy world, it still had that beautiful and engaging storytelling that the first book had for me to an extent as well. And then it also had interesting characters as well, but this book ended up taking it to the level that I wanted that first book to. And I think it just comes down to me preferring this story more. I also really loved how this book talked about stories and explains how and by who stories get told and how that shapes people's beliefs and knowledge and what it looks like when those stories get told inaccurately. And overall, this was an audiobook that definitely got me really excited to read the rest of the series. I will say, when you start and then when you finish the audiobook, it very much does feel like you are in the middle of these characters' journey, and kind of just like you were thrown into the middle of a much larger book, and I did feel like I was missing out on like the beginning and the ending portion. But I also only feel that way because I love like this little middle portion that we got, but I also would have loved to have that extra context just to like get to know the characters more. But it's a novella, and like I said, I still really enjoyed the story that was told in here, and I ended up giving When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain by Nghi 4.25 out of 5 stars. Next up, we have chapters 1 through 10, which is volume 1, and then a little bit of volume 2 of Saturn Apartments by Hisae Iwaoka. And this takes place in a future where humans are living in a giant structure that forms a ring around the Earth 35 kilometers in the sky. The higher the floor, the greater the status, and our main character Mitsu is the son of a window washer who has disappeared and is assumed to be dead. After graduating from junior high, Misu takes on the same occupation that his father once had and gets an outsider's look into the lives of the people living inside of the Saturn apartments as he struggles to adjust to his working life. So I recently posted a video where I read 3 random manga series, and this was the first series that I landed on. And I'm going to leave a lot of my more in-depth thoughts about this series to that video, but this is a very slice of life series in an interesting setting. It was refreshing but formulaic with a good amount of heart. I just wish that I got into it more than I did. And the next series from the video was Yashahime, Princess Half-Demon by Rumiko Takahashi and Takashi Shiina. And this is the sequel series to Inuyasha, and it follows Sesshomaru's daughter Toa, who is living in modern times, which isn't easy for her as she has no memory of where she came from and has to conceal her mysterious powers and just has trouble making friends in general. When a demon attack transports her back to the feudal era, she, her sister Setsuna, and her cousin Moroha have a mission given to them by the Tree of Ages to fulfill their destiny by finding their parents and healing a rift in time. I read the first 11 chapters of this, which is the first 3 volumes, and again, my full thoughts are going to stay over in that video. But for now, I did really like the adventure and the fantasy. I really liked our 3 main characters, but I do still have a lot, and I mean a lot, of Inuyasha left to watch before I can fully get into this. And next up we have A Tempest of Tea by Hafsah Faizal, and this follows our main character Arthi, who runs an illegal blood house for vampires, which she disguises as a tea room during the day. When her establishment gets threatened, Arthi is forced to make an unlikely deal and call upon the city's most skilled outcasts to help her infiltrate vampire society, and they find themselves in the middle of a conspiracy that could threaten the entire world. This was a book that I was super excited to read just based off of the description, but I also had mixed feelings about We Hunt the Flame by this author when I read that a few years ago. And while I do have like some mixed feelings about A Tempest of Tea, I was a much bigger fan of this, thankfully. I really loved all of the characters that we got point of views from, but I especially really loved Flick. I feel like the characters went on some really amazing and interesting personal journeys in here, and I just like them all from a personality standpoint as well. I also really liked the atmosphere. It felt dark and mysterious in a way that a vampire society book should. I really liked how they incorporated tea into this, and I loved all of the found family elements because that is just something that I am usually going to love. But I also just really like them, and I really like seeing them all work together, even if I didn't always love the dialogue or the banter, especially when it comes to the romance, because a lot of the romance just felt like insanely shoehorned into me. It felt really forced to me, and it also really took me out of the story. I just really did not like it, and it felt constant. But there was one couple in here who stole my heart despite all of that, and otherwise I do think that they did some really interesting things with the story. And there's also a focus on colonization and class and discrimination as well, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later on with a different book in this video. But this was the first book that I picked up after the 2024 presidential election, so those topics ended up hitting harder for me than they were already going to. And it's also a book that really did do its best to distract me when I really just didn't feel like doing anything, and I ended up giving A Tempest of Tea 4 out of 5 stars. And now we're back to the I read 3 random manga series video with Venus in the Blind Spot by Junji Ito. This was the 3rd series that I ended up with for that video, and it's a best of collection of some of Junji Ito's shorter works. And I ended up reading the whole collection because it was exactly 10 chapters, and that was the minimum amount of chapters that I wanted to read for that video. But it's also a collection. I was going to finish it anyway, and it's probably my favorite collection from Junji Ito, even if I do love something like Uzumaki like a little bit more. But again, full thoughts will be over in that video, and I ended up giving Venus in the Blind Spot 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, we have the audiobook version of Let This Radicalize You, Organizing the Revolution of Reciprocal Care, that was written by longtime organizers and movement educators Kelly Hayes and Mariame Kaba, as they examine some of the political lessons of the pandemic era, including mass protests, mutual aid, acts of care, rescue, and defense, and what they can teach us about a future that will require all of those things, and includes insights, lessons, and examples from different experience organizers, and it's intended to just aid and empower activists and organizers on their own journeys. This was originally published in May of 2023, and I don't know how that already feels so far away, but it does. And maybe it's because this book is just very reflective in nature, and it also did definitely serve as a reminder as to what things were like during the time period that this covers, which feels important always, but again, it definitely hit harder for me than it was already going to in November of 2024. And so did all of the content surrounding hope and how much time change can actually take. There's a part of this book towards the end that's basically like, I hope when you're reading this, things are better, they're progressing forward, but if they're not, and it continues on from there, and I'm just paraphrasing here. But yeah, definitely felt that one for sure, and I ended up feeling a lot of this. Next up, we have You and I Are Polar Opposites by Kocha Agasawa. This is a romantic comedy that follows our energetic main character Suzuki, who falls for the quiet boy in her class whose name is Tani. I read chapters 64 and 65 this month, and chapter 65 is officially the final chapter, which means that one of my favorite manga series is officially over, but it did end with an anime announcement, which was always my dream for this series. Like, I did a video a while ago of like books and manga that I want to see get adapted, and I talked about this series in that video, and I said that it was probably the one that I wanted the most out of everything that I talked about in that video, which is really saying something because I talked about a lot of things that I really love in that video, but You and I Are Polar Opposites has always been just like on another level for me, and I'm just going to miss them so much, and that's an understatement. But it is nice to know that it might take until 2026, but I will see them again one day. But You and I Are Polar Opposites is an adorable, wholesome, romantic comedy with some really amazing couples and characters. There was not a chapter that I didn't leave feeling happy, and it's silly and it's adorable, but they also do have a lot of really amazing conversations and character growth and just relationships that felt super healthy all around. And they do know how to get serious when it comes to that, and they just really impressed me in almost every way, in a way that not many manga series have. Like, I've taken actual life advice from this series, and I do not say this next thing lightly, but it is the only other series that has ever given me like Skip and Loafer type of feelings, and all of the feelings this series gave me were so incredible, and I've been reading this series almost from the beginning, and I'm just so grateful that I got to follow them for the years that they were ongoing, and they ended in such an amazing way that I cannot wait to see animated, because if done well, and it better be, I will be sobbing. That being said, there is a couple in here that I would have loved to have seen a little bit more of before they ended, so that I could just see them get together, but I also really loved their final moments together. So much so that I don't really want to complain, so I'm not going to, but I would love to see them again in the future. Or really just any of these characters again one day, whether that's a spin-off or just like an extra one-shot or something. Just like anything that continues the story just like a little bit more, I will take it. And again, I do have a full video up on my channel where I talk about my thoughts on this series more in depth, but yeah, they're an all-time favorite for me. I don't think that I could ever run out of good, amazing things to say about them, and they deserve all of the amazing things and the success that is coming their way, and I am 1000% giving them 5 out of 5 stars. Next up is Volume 1 of Crossplay Love, Otaku, and Punk by Toru, and this is a romantic comedy that follows a delinquent who is in love with a girl who works at a maid cafe, but he's too embarrassed to go in and talk to her until he dresses as a girl himself. But what he doesn't know is that this girl that he's in love with is actually his otaku classmate, who feels much more confident and comfortable around others when he's also dressed as a girl. I randomly came across this series in November, and I really just loved the idea of an otaku and punk ship and romance, so I looked into it more, as I always do when there are LGBTQ+ themes involved in manga and anime, because unfortunately with some of these series you just never really know what you're going to get in terms of representation. But the reviews seemed good, so I read the first volume, and they don't always handle things perfectly. Like, there were a couple of comments here and there that could have certainly have been better, especially because I do think that this volume did do better for like 95% of this. And there are some really lovely moments and friendships in here, especially towards the end of the volume. And they're doing a lot of things in general that are giving me a lot of hope, but what I think is going to be really telling is when this misunderstanding clears up and just how that's handled, so we'll see, I guess. But for now, it's cute, it's silly, I really like the characters, and I'm starting to ship, which is what I wanted in the first place. And I think that they could end up doing some really cool things with their character and their relationship growth, especially when it comes to their LGBTQ+ themes. Like, I would love to see them take some of the routes that I watched the Senpai and Otoko Noko anime take this summer, for example. But again, it mostly just feels kind of silly and unserious right now, which is part of why I like them for sure, even if I would love to see them dive a little bit deeper if they're going to do it well. And again, they have shown me that they are capable of doing well, but it's also a series that I haven't like fully let my guard down with just yet. And I'm currently waiting on the second volume of The Guy She Was Interested In Wasn't a Guy at All, and this does almost feel like the perfect series to pass that time with, as long as they don't mess it up. And based on the reviews and ratings that I've seen of some of the future volumes, I do feel optimistic here, and hopefully it stays that way. Okay, so it is now time to talk about the chapters from the series that I am caught up to and currently reading over on the Shonen Jump app as they update, including Chapter 117 of Kaiju number 8, Chapter 24 and 24.1 of Ruri Dragon, Chapters 171 to 174 of Blue Box, Chapters 133 to 136 of Akane Banashi, and Chapters 56 to 58.1 of Kagurabachi. And my favorites this month were, once again, and for the final time, You and I Are Polar Opposites, who, if they didn't end this month, would be in this part of the video instead, but they did end this month, so we're gonna focus on Blue Box today. And they are my other adorable, lovely little rom-com series that I've been reading for years now, except Blue Box has sports. And these chapters were extremely adorable, both romance and friendship-wise. The love that I feel for this series really does feel like it's at like an all-time high right now, especially combined with their anime adaptation that's currently airing. And I just cannot wait to read more and see where they're going to go with their current drama and storylines. Okay, so that is all that I have for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and answer the question that'll be around here if you want to do that. And hopefully I will see you here next time. Bye.